I've come here today to declare our independence from the tyranny of corruption, which robs us of affordable lives, our hope, our patriotism, our ideals, our freedoms, and ultimately our sense of ourselves as a good and capable people. Is healing our divided nation possible? Let's go take back our country. I'm Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and I approve this message. My job is to tell people the truth, and if the Americans have an appetite for that I will be president.
This is a time to bring America back together. We have been torn apart.
The reason people were having fights with their family is because the families were being lied to about information. Some family members believed the lies, some did not.
We are absolutely up against a major media wall.
And that causes the polarization, and it amplifies the vitriol. It poisons all of society when the government is lying, when the media is lying to you.
It's really hard to tell how many people are awake and how much this is exposed to the average American, because we're living in a sea of propaganda and censorship.
The people standing here today do not identify with any political party. We identify with unity, with health, with freedom. That's what's important about today.
My mission over the next 18 months of this campaign, throughout my presidency, will be to end the corrupt merger of state and corporate power that is threatening now to poison our children and our people with chemicals and pharmaceutical drugs to strip mine our assets, to hollow out the middle class, and keep us in a constant state of war. When we destroy a species, when we destroy a special place, we're diminishing our capacity to sense the divine. We deserve a president in this country who cares about these things and who talks about these things to the American people. My father, when he came back one time from the Delta, he said, when you get older, I want you to help those people. And when I'm president, I'm going to be president for those people. You give me a piece of ground and a sword, and I am going to take back this country with your help, the help of all the homeless Republicans, the Democrats, and independents who are Americans first. We're going to do a mass experiment, a new kind of mass experiment of what happens when you tell people the truth, and see what happens.
I feel like the whole country needs to know what's going on here. It's bigger than alarming.
This is the worst I've ever seen it.
I witnessed this dystopian nightmare of this uncontrolled flow of desperate humanity crossing the border and converging here because of misbegotten policies by high leadership of the United States.
When President Biden took office, he signed some executive orders that basically halted all wall construction. It put our agents at risk, it put the migrants at risk, it incentivized the profit making for the smugglers.
At the end of the day, this is a business. Billions and billions of dollars every month are earned from transporting people across into the United States.
These kids are being exploited all along this track. There's nothing humane about any of this.
In this room, obviously, we designed it to be as comfortable as we can possibly make it, because the reality is no child should ever have to come to this exam room.
Señora y mi hija están conmigo. Pero mi hija de 18 años, no sé dónde está.
We see a lot of violence as people are making across the border through Mexico or their countries. We see that devastation in the human lives.
What happens if the family doesn't have the money to buy the plane ticket?
Well, FEMA reimburses us. We can buy the ticket and
so you buy the ticket for
yes.
They were told they'd get a bite at the American dream here, and that dream becomes a nightmare along the journey.
As I travel around this country, I'm watching this devastating plague of addiction unfolding in every direction. From big cities to small towns, Americans are dying of drug overdoses in record numbers. I've lost family members, one of my brothers and a niece, to drug overdoses, and I understand the suffering that so many American families are enduring. America lost about 3,000 people on 9/11, and we launched an $8 trillion war on terror in response. We're losing 30 times that number every year to drug overdoses, and we hardly do anything about it. I'm going to change that. I'm searching the country for the very best ideas and solutions to addiction and hopelessness. As president, a top priority for me will be to turn our nation toward recovery from its drug crisis.
This is open air drug bazaar. You can see people in there smoking crack, tweakers, smoking meth right behind me.
You know, not everybody out here is homeless. About 20% of the people that are here on the street that you see actually have housing, but they don't have jobs, right? They're disabled or they're struggling with addiction or mental illness. Come out here to the street and hang out. And when you hang out and you have nothing else to do, you self-medicate. You got drug dealers around the corner and on the next block all selling fentanyl.
Are they injecting it?
Actually, more than 50% of the people out here now are smoking fentanyl on foil.
It's right across the street from the school. If you took away the drug dealers and the drugs, 80% of this problem goes away. But because it's so easily available and it's so cheap out here for people to access, it just creates this permanent situation where people are out here struggling with addiction. And now, because of fentanyl, 2 people are dying a day from drug overdose in this city. There goes a little thing right there. That's for someone that died. You know, R.I.P. Black.
That's Kennedy.
Right?
Yeah, how you doing?
How you doing, man?
Good.
There's been changes to state law in California, Prop 47, which made it next to impossible to do what needs to be done.
Why? What does that do?
It decriminalized or reduced penalties for quality of life crimes. So drug possession, open air drug use, shoplifting have all been reduced to misdemeanors. So a lot of the times people just get a ticket and nothing happens to them. So they get emboldened by it, you know? And that's kind of where we're at.
The owner said he lost over $100,000 in merchandise and cash.
Back in the days, like, you know, we'd maybe peel off to the side, somewhere else to get high, not just sit down right here and wherever.
Some are doing drugs, some are selling them, some are buying, and it's just constant. And San Francisco is on a way higher level than, you know, anywhere that I'd ever been.
Why do you think those people all crouched over like that?
Why are they hunched over? A few different reasons. One, some of them have been on methadone a really long time, and that's one of the side effects of methadone.
Oh, it is?
Right? Yeah.
I didn't know that. I never heard that.
The other issue is that, you know, look, they've been on fentanyl for so long. That's part of that quick deterioration that you're seeing with fentanyl. You're seeing people that are in their 20s now that look like they're 70 years old because they're using this drug that's just destroying them from the inside out. Whatever chance they had of making a full recovery, watch out for the poop, is being robbed from them.
If you put a rat in a cage alone with the choice between drinking regular water and cocaine water, it almost always chooses the cocaine water and will drink it until it dies. Whereas you take the same rat and you put it in a much larger cage with siblings and family and friends, and it almost never chooses the cocaine water. My first many years of thinking about addiction, I really believed that it was all about just some personal choice and willpower of not doing this bad thing, this harmful thing that feels really good. That amazed me, that connection and community and freedom to learn and have fun and play made them not want to anesthetize themselves.
I've seen that in the wild with birds. I train, animals train hawks. And if you raise a bird, like even a crow, with its siblings, it will develop normal sexual behavior and social behavior, even if the parents aren't there.
And in this society, we're all just rugged individuals going out for ourselves. I think we have a real sense of emptiness and loss and pain.
I'm working to bring some solutions that are rooted in what I experienced on the street.
Can you talk a little bit about your personal story?
Before I fell into my addiction, I was actually a child support officer for the city and county of San Francisco. In early 2015, I had foot surgery. Sent me home from the hospital with a 30-day supply of oxycodone for the pain. And, I was taking one pill every 4 to 6 hours as directed. And then, the pain was really bothering me. So I said, well, let me try 2. Popped 2 pills. And then one day I was like, well, let me try 3. All of a sudden, I felt euphoria. Like all my problems went away, my marital problems, my financial problems, the pain, anything that was going on just melted away for about 3 to 4 hours. And I liked that feeling. And I didn't ever want it to stop. And so the 30-day supply of pills that I had, within 10 days, I was already running out. I called my doctor to try to get more, and of course my doctor's like, what's wrong? Why are you asking for more pills? And I made a really fateful decision at that point because I was starting to go into withdrawal. I was nervous, and I was already obsessing about the drug, about the pills. I actually looked it up on Google, where can I buy pills on the street in San Francisco? And it took me to YouTube that references a place here in the Tenderloin called Golden Gate in Leavenworth. So at the peak of my addiction, I was taking 560 milligrams of oxycodone a day just to stay well, just to function. And the levee kind of broke because I was spending, $30 a pill, 7 80 milligram pills a day, $210 a day, 7 days a week. Well, I went broke. Stopped paying my mortgage. Was hiding all the debt from my wife. She knew I was sick, but I was still functioning. Over the next couple of years, that spiraled into a heroin addiction and then a fentanyl addiction. I was high around my kids all the time. At the time, they were small. I was driving them under the influence. I got into a couple of car accidents with them in the car. I chose addiction over my own family. It's not something that I'm proud of, but it happens. It happens all the time. And I left, and I proceeded to become homeless.
This doorway right here is where I used to sleep most of the time when I was out here. I just had 2 pieces of cardboard, a jacket and a hoodie, and I lived out here for 6 months.
Did you have any contact with your wife at that point?
Well, no, she'd put a restraining order on me, so I wasn't allowed to.
I supported my habit through shoplifting and eventually started holding drugs for the dealers. They would pay me in drugs to hold their drugs for them. So I'm holding big gym socks filled with pre-wrapped bindles of heroin, baggies of meth, and crack cocaine in my pocket. And I got busted with all those drugs. After the 6th arrest, I spent 3 months in county jail where I got clean.
What's your relationship with your wife today?
Well, we have reconciled. A couple of years ago, we reconciled, and that's maybe the greatest.
I reconcile, you mean you're back together with her?
Back together. So first of all, my wife's a saint. She gave me the opportunity to make it back in my recovery. It almost destroyed me and my family. I don't want that to happen to other people. I want to help people understand that these folks out here that you step over every day that are out on the street are human beings like you, and they have it within them to recover, and we need to create those opportunities for them. We need to be their family.
Is there any country that's doing it right?
The Netherlands is doing it right, yeah.
And what do they do?
If you would come to Amsterdam in the 80s, you would have seen hundreds of people on the street. Dealers, drug addicts, in alleys and in streets.
Amsterdam in the mid-1980s looked like San Francisco today, and there were 3,000 overdoses in Amsterdam alone annually.
At this moment, we have 40 deaths a year in the Netherlands.
Only 40?
Yes.
And that's down from thousands.
It starts with the fact that everybody says, yeah, this is a problem. And you have to acknowledge that the government has to step forward. And you have to acknowledge that it's not a problem that you can solve by yourself. You need other parties than just health service. You need the police. You need the local government. And all those parties has to work together, and you make sure that every particular drug addict is having a plan. There is no such thing as one solution, because all those clients are different and also different in what they need.
Some of the American mayors are operating under a judicial decision that says you can't remove these people from the street unwillingly.
I know that there are laws in your country that are different than in ours, but from my point of view, you see a patient on the street suffering of schizophrenia, suffering of the fact that he or she is using drugs, suffering of the fact that he or she is homeless. You have to do something about it. But it's also tough love, because the fact that someone is living on the street in a tent, it's not allowed. It's not allowed to use drugs on the street. You need housing corporations, you need sheltering.
What do these shelters look like, Renee? Because that's what one of the issues in this country is the price of housing, the cost of housing.
So we had all kinds of sheltering, because not everybody is able to live in a house. If you are housing someone who's very addicted, at some point he or she will get an overdose, so you will find him or her dead.
Good afternoon, Judge Lightman presiding.
70% of people who are in jail in the United States, they either have a serious mental illness, a substance use disorder, or both. When the American community mental health system was designed and developed, most people with the most acute and serious illnesses were still in the state hospitals.
And I think we have an obligation as a country, especially a country as rich as ours.
President Kennedy, in his last public bill, he signed the first National Community Mental Health Act. And it comes with a $3 billion authorizing act, which is a lot of money even today. But tragically, due to the president's assassination and the escalation of the Vietnam War, Congress never appropriated any money. So the states closed all the hospitals. And all those people that were there, they didn't have anywhere to go. And so when they got out, they started going to the street and ultimately into jail. 5 times as many people in our jail with mental illness than any psychiatric hospital in Florida. Most of this population with mental illnesses that are in the criminal justice system have horrific histories of trauma, mostly sexual abuse. And what happens is often people that have these histories of trauma are going to take drugs. Why? Because they feel terrible. We know that kids experiment, but the kids that get addicted are generally kids with histories of trauma. If you really want to improve public safety, you have to get people with these illnesses treated. There's nothing civil or right about letting a man or a woman slowly die like that.
Judge Leifman asks an important question. What if judges, police, social workers, and peer counselors join forces to keep drug-addicted and mentally ill people out of jail and get them into treatment instead? He brought all the stakeholders into one room, and together they created the Criminal Mental Health Project. They now work as a team to offer addicts who are arrested a deal that they can't refuse. They can either enter the program or they can go to jail. Nearly everyone chooses the program, which means that they have to stay sober, get treatment, learn job skills, and find housing. If they meet all of those requirements, then they're able to clear their criminal records.
We have a different approach, which is a combination of accountability and rehabilitation.
All rise.
We do a full assessment of the person's history, their family, their initial drug use, any trauma.
The next case is Ruben Wall.
Every case is different. Every person is different.
They're going to treat your mental illness and your substance abuse. You understand? Yes? Are you ready to go?
Our treatment is intense. It involves individual counseling, group sessions, drug testing 3 times a week or more. Do you have children? Do you need family therapy?
So don't feel bad about still having to work on yourself. We're all a work in progress. Nobody's perfect.
A lot of the participants have been in active addiction so long they don't remember what it's like to not use drugs.
And it's absolutely normal for you to feel depressed, anxious, confused. You're going through a process. Can you stick with me though? Everything I hear is positive. And you're really working on yourself and you're making a lot of progress. And this time around, we're gonna do it different, right? This time around will be different. I love you too. Okay, bye-bye.
If you're fighting the good fight, you're here as long as it takes. We work with you, we treat you. But if you're not, then I have to let you go.
How are you, Seth?
I'm doing great, Your Honor.
And you went to probation. You were there for 2 hours.
Yeah.
And you could not produce a sample. You couldn't hear it.
Yes.
This is suspect, Seth.
I understand.
Seth,
I'm well aware
you're
of
on
it.
probation, and I've already told you the bottom of your guidelines are 10 years in state prison. And I'm asking you again, is there something that you need to tell me? Tell me now. Because the minute that you walk through that door, I'm not going to hear it.
Okay.
It's too late.
There's nothing I'm going to tell you, Your Honor. I've been 100% sober and I'm being truthful with you.
Seth is soft-spoken and kind and caring. He's studying to be a chef, but a person who's in active addiction is not their true self. So in active addiction, he burglarized 10 homes and would have continued on his journey of crime, but for this program. He needs a higher level of supervision, and I'm here to make sure that he's held accountable in the event that he doesn't complete the program.
You're going to put it in your mouth, under your tongue. My second line will tell me the drug line, whether you're positive for any drugs or not. I test them for fentanyl, K2 spice, buprenorphine, oxycodone, barbiturates, benzos, PCP, amphetamine, methamphetamine, THC, morphine, and cocaine. Okay, you ready for the results?
Yeah.
Okay, it came back. And you are negative for everything on the saliva test.
I'm in school right now. I have a job. You know, I have friends now. I have my family back. You know, like I have peace. You know, like stuff that I didn't have when I was using.
You are no longer a convicted felon. I wish you. The only thing we ask here in drug court is that you pay it forward and you continue to pay it forward. Roxana, you deserve it. You've really changed your life. You're an extraordinary person. I always say to people everywhere, Addicts are extraordinary people. Thank you. There you go. That's for your money.
It doesn't take 6 months to recover from a substance. It doesn't take that. It takes you. So there's no time frame.
We have peer specialists that are people who used to be part of the program and now will assist some of the clients in navigating through all of the different things they have to do.
I'm part of your support chain because I've been knowing you for how long? You 2 years, you about three. Remember I tell you, I am in recovery. The same way as everybody else is in recovery, I'm in recovery. Everybody knows I'm PTSD. They know I suffer from that. I go from that. I still have the same thing. I still have to take the medication. I still have to take the classes. I still have to do all that stuff right here. So should it be a time frame for me? No, I'm just like you. I want to give you something like, hey, I'm just like him and I can do it. He did it, I can do it. You know, he says he suffers. I do, I have post-traumatic stress disorder. I tell him all the time, but you can look through my records, you're gonna be like, this guy, is something wrong with this guy. What do you like right now? I don't care what it is, how it goes.
Rollerblading and watching movies.
Rollerblading and watching movies. Will that get you out of trouble?
Yeah.
Okay, see, that's how it works. This is what it's about.
The secret sauce of our recipe are the peers. The brain's primary function is to develop relationships with other people. And it's part of why COVID was so difficult because of the isolation. But think about being isolated because of your mental illness. And that contributes to your inability to recover. And so when people come into the court, the first thing we do is assign them a peer. It helps them reestablish relationships. And that's like the least expensive thing we do, right? And the peers incentivize them to want to get better because they want to have a life again.
Even the most broken people can reinvent themselves and become somebody they have never known. It doesn't matter if you've lived your life on the streets, been a lifelong drug addict, or spent your life in and out of jails and prisons. Anyone can change. I know this because I was one of those broken people. I was a self-centered, hedonistic, gun-running, drug-dealing, out-of-control drug addict and criminal for nearly 25 years.
I knew what I was doing was wrong, and I knew when I went to prison, somebody else was going to pay my rent and take care of my medical needs. So I was exploiting the public. I like to say that I was the problem, I am the solution. The day you get here, you become part of the solution. You are no longer part of the problem. Nobody's paying for you, you're doing it yourself.
He's got an expanding empire here that is really, truly extraordinary.
It's special because of the amount of time, the fact that it's completely free, the fact that we don't take any money from the government at all, that we generate all of our own revenue because then we feel we can do what's best for our students because they can stay as long as they need to.
How do you pay for it?
At the Other Side Academy, we have our own social enterprises. Our moving company is the #1 rated moving company in the entire state of Utah, ran by ex-felons and ex-drug addicts.
Shot off a 12-gauge shotgun in the house. I had no business being around guns in that mind frame.
Drug offenses, burglaries, forgeries, all the criminal stuff that goes along with being a drug addict.
Went in and out of the Salt Lake County Jail about 20-something times.
I was a heroin addict for 17 years, just a complete dirtbag.
If your stuff wasn't bolted down or locked up, I was stealing it to get my next fix.
I had a daughter I never raised, unfortunately. I chose drugs instead of her.
Nobody is usually ready on day 30, day 60, day 90, or 2 years, day 730. Everybody is ready at a different time in their recovery journey. So we offer them as much time as they need at the Other Side Academy, and we're able to do that because we're not tethered to a government funding source. We're able to do it ourselves. So the model itself is beautiful, and it helps teach them to be self-sustaining, to do it themselves.
It becomes more than just about how much work can you accomplish, but how well can you do it, and teaching the principles of honesty and integrity. That builds your character, and those same principles can carry over into your daily life.
We also have 2 large thrift boutiques. These are very large, well put together. We've won Best of State and Best of Salt Lake City with both our moving company and our thrift boutiques. We have a construction company.
What is the construction firm like?
We do flat concrete work. We do basement remodels, bathroom remodels, those kinds of things. And those hard skills, I can't tell you how many people want to go to the construction department to learn that stuff. And we're generating revenue doing it with a social enterprise that's ours.
I love what I do now. I love running this construction company. It's been fantastic to watch it grow, to watch the men that I mentor. We're doing $250,000 worth of work a month for outside customers.
Lots of these organizations didn't used to hire people with criminal backgrounds. Now they want people with criminal backgrounds. There's a list of employers that hire our graduates. The day they go out into the workforce, we have a job ready for them. Living wage, $25 to $35 an hour, depending on their skill set.
I'm standing on my own 2 feet. I'm providing for myself.
My children are back in my life, and, you know, people count on me today.
My heart is completely full. You know, I have a best friend that's my soulmate.
I always thought success was like cars and clothes and tattoos and money and all of that. And, you know, the way that I feel in here and the way that I feel up here and the people that I have in my life, I am so successful today.
It did more than save my life. You know, I won the lottery. I won the lottery by going through this, so I want that opportunity for other people as well.
Thank you for making the pilot for an alternative that's humane and is idealistic.
I lead with my story. You're not afraid to tell yours because it's real and people need to hear it and people need to understand that this happens, but recovery is possible. And recovery for you or for me or for somebody else might be different. We need a whole myriad of options for people. I hope you win.
Thank you.
I really do. I hope you win.
Every human being on the planet has accumulated hurts from the times they weren't allowed to fully heal. So, and I think of it as like a big ice chunk that we have inside us that limits our ability to function well.
Part of my philosophy on treating not just addiction, but mental health is this idea of doing hard things, usually some kind of physical hard thing that then touches on emotional hard places too. When we try hard things, it gives us access to working on the early traumas that might push us towards addiction. I've always been an athlete, but boxing has proven to be one of the hardest sports I've ever done.
As I do it, I'm noticing the limitations that come up in me that are based in the ways that I've been hurt before in the past. Physical violence that I've been through, injuries that I've been through, self-doubt that I carried as a result of being hurt.
You do it, and then you cry about it, and talk about it, and share about it, and let that out of your body.
Yeah, we're about to do some sparring, I gather.
Good shot, Mike, right there. 1, 2. 1, 2. Right there. Whoa. Just like that, good.
When we try hard things, it gives us access to working on the early traumas that might push us towards addiction.
Perfect, here we go, you got it.
Thanks, Bobby.
I don't feel like taking drugs.
A lot of the time, we just don't know what it's going to look like until we're in the middle of it, because everybody is different. Everybody's on their unique journey. My son started his recovery journey at 17 years old. Broken arm, 3 shots of morphine on the way to the hospital, a prescription for Percocet. Within 6 months, it turned into full-blown heroin addiction. His first real success with sobriety was at a horse ranch in Washington, where he was connected to the outdoors, he was connected to nature. And during that time, we would talk all the time. You know, what if we could take this similar model up there that you learned on the horse ranch, and we could kind of expand on that? I started looking for property, and I drove through the gate. I knew in that moment that this is what we were going to do. Welcome.
Hey.
Brandon Glenn.
I'm very grateful for you taking the time to show us around. Talk about what a typical day is for people. Do they have chores to do?
They get up at 6:30 a.m. They have a morning meditation first thing in the morning. After that, they will do their morning chores. They take care of the animals.
Let's go, Gandalf. Come on, buddy, come on. Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go.
Walking outside and connecting to nature in the outdoors, hands in the dirt. They're really taking care of each other along the way. Some of the most healing conversations take place out there, you know, among their peers. My son, 14 months homeless, Los Angeles, Skid Row, heroin addict. Less than 3% of people make it off that.
Where is your son now?
My son, he's married, and I have a grandbaby, and he's looking at 3.5 years sobriety right now. And it was getting that connection to nature and outdoors and purpose that really changed his life.
Oh, yeah, you found one of those guys. We got carrots, we got tomatoes over here, squash that's gonna be growing around it, as well as beans that will be climbing up the corn in the middle.
The clients in the house take the fresh produce to the farmers markets.
Then that's gonna be 25.
All the money raised on the farmers markets, we provide scholarships for sober living and for mental health scholarships. We got a group of women that meets out here every Monday at 9 a.m. We wanted to figure out a way to support women in recovery as well. So we opened up this entire space, and we're like, what do you want to do with this space here? So they're growing herbs. They've just planted ginger and turmeric in some of these raised beds. You know, there's something we say out here on the farm is I can't create a vegetable, but I can create the space for the vegetable to grow. I can't get someone sober. I can create the space, the place, and opportunity, and plant that seed called recovery, and then guide them along the way. But at the end of the day, it's up to them.
Addiction is absolutely destroying the country. So, you know, I'm going to anybody who's got a model that seems to be working. So that's, you know, why I wanted to talk to you guys.
Pretty sure almost everyone here can agree that we didn't necessarily come here in the best place in life. We all kind of burned it down to the ground in one form or another, and definitely feel a lot of shame. But just getting my hands in some dirt and getting the blood flowing, it will change, you know, even the worst day into feeling like everything's going okay.
Just knowing that everything that we do here is going to help people in similar situations as all of us, it's something that's really special.
The other treatments, we didn't work. We sat in a room for like 8 hours a day.
It's dangerous out there. That fentanyl is just taking out people. And those who know the steps, step 12, it's working with others in service. And this place really helps you with that. That can be like the glue to keep this all together. Yeah, love this place.
How important is it to not have cell phones?
Pretty important for me.
I actually loved not having it, you know? It was amazing to be able to disconnect from the world for a little bit.
And it forces us to connect because it's hard to get a normal person who's not an addict to understand what it's like using against your will. Like me going to the drug dealer screaming at myself in the car, do not do this. And I can't, I know I'm gonna die because I've done that once, and I know I'm gonna spend every dime and be homeless. Yet I can't stop doing it. And there's not many people in the world you can sit down to and have this conversation with, except him. And him go, yeah, I get that.
A lot of you have been in treatment before. Is there something that you think that you're learning from this experience that is gonna keep you sober this time?
I'll say, for one, working with farm equipment. Didn't know anything about that any other place I went to.
So do you think that you might do an outdoor profession out here or career?
I'd be open to that because this is building like skills for the outside world. You know, you start your day doing things, useful things.
Like, I helped build this. This is not my background. I've never built anything in my life. And I remember when I was done, I talked to Brandon, I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. I'm like, helped build this.
I think we need to name it after you.
I'd be game.
It's crazy because it's like, you know how many people we teach in here how to use a broom or sweep for the first time, you know, and it's wild. Or to use a laundry room, you know, like a washer and dryer. Or like why it's important to make your bed in the morning.
Brooks
like,
filled up the coffee maker one time full of coffee cream.
Yeah, like see, it's stuff like that. You know, it's like there's little skills that go off that you don't even think about. But also it's like that guy, like that same kid, this same kid right here is probably one of the most emotional, available persons I've ever met in my life. I learned to be more emotionally available through people like you. We come from all different walks of life. Wook boy here, dude, like, I don't, you know, like, we wouldn't cross paths in West Texas, you know, like, but these people here have so much to offer me, and I love every single one of them, and that's what this place does. It brings us together to form a nucleus of community and love like we've never truly, like, experienced before, and it teaches me the true value in life and what people have to offer, and if the solution is connection, and you got it right here, you know.
You guys have any questions for me?
I was told that you were in recovery. Would you want to tell a little bit about your journey?
You know, I identified with a lot what you said because about using again without my own permission. And I started doing heroin when I was 15 years old. And then I did it without my own permission for 14 years.
Robert Francis Kennedy was 42 years old and had just won the victory of his political life in the California presidential primary.
HD reported that Senator Kennedy had been shot.
My dad was killed when I was 14, and there was a lot of chaos in my household after that. But I feel, honestly, that I was born an addict. I think I was medicating various issues that I had. But, you know, to me, the most demoralizing feature of this disease was my incapacity to keep contracts with myself, of telling myself at, you know, earnestly, sincerely, honestly, at 9 o'clock in the morning, I'm never going to do that again. And then at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I'd be doing it. I tried again and again to stop and just couldn't do it. I had been raised in a very pious Catholic household, and I had read the lives of the saints every night. And I knew that there were people throughout history like St. Augustine, who was a full-blown alcoholic and sex addict till he was 30 years old. And then he had this transformation, this spiritual realignment. I knew that I wanted to have a spiritual awakening because I did not want to be out on the street white-knuckling it and, you know, struggling with the impulse. I came across a book by Carl Jung that was called Synchronicity. And Jung was deeply spiritual. He was one of the fathers of psychiatry. The word synchronicity means a coincidence. Like you're talking about somebody that you haven't thought about in 20 years. And at that moment, the phone rings. It's that person. And Jung, he had this one experience where he was sitting with a patient, and she was telling him the story about a dream that she had. The fulcrum of that dream was a scarab beetle, which is a creature that really doesn't exist in Northern Europe. Well, while she's telling him this dream, Jung hears this bing, bing, bing on the window behind him. And he opens the window, and the scarab beetle flies in and lands in his palm. And he turns to the woman, he said, "Is this what you were dreaming about?" And she's like dumbfounded and says, "Yes." He thought it was God breaking his own rules to reach in and kind of touch us on the shoulder and say, you know, I'm here if you're willing to see me. So Jung says that he could prove, having seen tens of thousands of people come through his hospital, that people who believed in God got better faster, and that their recovery was more durable and enduring than people who didn't. So when he said believing in God is going to help, is going to make things easier, I just made an intellectual decision that I'm going to start believing in God. If you pretend to yourself that you believe in God, that the belief and the compliance will precede the evidence, that you will see evidence that is then utterly convincing, but you have to start with the belief with no evidence. And so that's what I started doing. I just started living my life, you know, as if there was a God up there, as if he was watching me all the time, and as if I had to behave myself as if I was being watched, so that I had to act honorably even when I didn't have an audience, even when no one was looking at me. And I started breaking my day down into like 40 different decisions. And each one of them now had a moral dimension. Like when the alarm goes off in the morning, do I get right out of bed, or do I stay in bed for another 20 minutes with my indolent thoughts? Do I make the bed? You know, somebody said that that's the most important thing that for me that I do every day. I stayed in a hotel last night. I'm in a hotel every night. I make the bed when I get up, which is insane, right? Because they're paying somebody to do that, right? But I do it because it's part of building character, because I made a commitment and I get to keep that commitment no matter whether it makes sense or not. And occasionally people have said to me, I don't want to go to AA meetings because they'll brainwash you. But at that point in my recovery, I would say, bring it on, because my brain needed washing. A guy told me when I came in the program, I said, how long do you have to keep coming to these meetings? And he said, just keep coming till you like it. And I've been coming for 40 years, I still don't like it. But I go because when I go, the rest of my life works. And I don't have that big empty hole inside of me that I'm trying to fill with things outside of me, with drugs, sex, alcohol, extreme behavior. I went to a meeting this morning, you know, and it was a shitty meeting. But I did it. You know, I went. We're here to build character, which is, you know, enduring. And you get that from hard work, from showing up when you say you're going to show up, even when you don't want to.
It's an honor to have a presidential candidate come here and not only relate with us on a personal level, but also wanting to take initiative to start walking in the right direction to fix this problem.
I really, you know, wish all of you guys the best.
Just like seeing Mr. Kennedy here, he's running for president, just, wow, what can I do whenever I get out of here? You know, it's awesome.
I feel like it's completely swept under the rug as far as like treatment and addiction. So just hearing someone who's willing to talk about it is huge.
Today, the biggest industry in America's depressed rural areas are prisons. I'm going to bring a new industry to these forgotten corners of America, where addicts can help each other to recover from their addictions. We're going to build hundreds of healing farms where American kids can reconnect to America's soil, where they can learn the discipline of hard work that rebuilds self-esteem, and where they can master new skills as farmers, ranchers, carpenters, furniture makers, bakers and cooks, electricians, plumbers, HVAC technicians, and other trades. We're going to finance these recovery farms with a federal tax on legalized marijuana. We'll put no time limit on recovery, as everyone's journey is different. There is hope for our nation to heal the scourge of addiction. We just have to make it a national priority, and when I'm in the White House, we will. I'm looking at a golden eagle.
I see it.
Oh yeah, wow.
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy is in the building. But before we bring him out here, I just wanted to draw our attention to two very special guests that are local to the community. And the first one that I will introduce is Mr. Ralph Martinez.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. Today, my name is Ralph Martinez, and I'm an ex-drug addict whose family didn't want him around because of the shenanigans that I was pulling to feed my habit. I was addicted for 11 years to cocaine and heroin from 2001 to 2012. In 2006, I became homeless in my community. I lost my family, I lost my home, I lost my self-identity. I lived under a couple different bridges in the Bosque area in makeshift tents, in abandoned buildings, in places that I can find warmth in the cold of winter. I was in and out of rehab 6 different times, in and out of jail, picked up 6 different felonies along the way. In 2012, I was able to plant my feet back on the ground and reestablish my life. 7 years ago, I started doing community activism in my community because I wanted individuals that were going through similar situations that I had went through to see that there is light at the end of the tunnel. And I've been blessed within the past 7 years to help bring in millions of dollars into my community that has gone towards programs that deal with our community's less fortunate, youth, seniors, and education. I'm the co-founder of the first ever homeless shelter in my community called Espinela Pathways Shelter. And I'm also the co-founder of the first ever recovery living facility in my community called Pathways Village. Most recently, I was honored to team up with a really good friend of mine, and we worked very hard at launching a re-entry program using the culinary arts world as a stepping stone for individuals coming out of incarceration to integrate back into society. Please help me to welcome the co-founder of the Entrepreneurial Institute of Northern New Mexico and 3-time Food Network champion, Mr. Fernando Ruiz.
Thank you. I never in a million years thought I'd be put in the position that I'm in now. I opened up my own restaurant next month in Santa Fe. A little bit about myself, also an addict, ex-addict. I've been shot, I've been stabbed. I went to prison for trafficking guns and drugs twice in Arizona. Spent 4.5 years of my life incarcerated. In the recent 5-6 years, like Ralph said, I've managed to beat Bobby Flay, win Chopped, and also Guys Grocery Games. Thank you. Like Ralph said, we just launched this re-entry program in the prison up in Santa Fe. Curriculum ends first week of July. You'd be surprised to see the look on these gentlemen's faces when we walk in that prison with an ice chest full of food that they're getting ready to prepare and cook themselves. It's actually working. We need more programs like this. We also need more compassion for individuals like us, because guess what? I'm an ex-convict, I'm an ex-felon, I'm an ex-drug runner and gun runner, and I just opened up a restaurant in your neighborhood, and we're neighbors now. Escondido. So the plan for Escondido is to have multiple Escondidos within the next 8 to 10 years. That's my goal with me and my coaches and my mentors. With this program that Ralph and I developed, our students coming out, and I call them students, the COs call them inmates, we call them our students. My students, our students coming out of this program are going to come to work with me at Escondido. And if they don't want to work with me, they can work with multiple other agencies around Santa Fe, especially the restaurant, hospitality industry, and also here in Albuquerque. That's our goal for this initiative, for this program. And I am honored to introduce the man of the hour, Mr. Robert Kennedy.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Albuquerque. Thank you for coming out tonight. I want to thank the filmmakers, Robert Campos, Donna LoCicero, Brandon Dumlell, and then I want to thank Ralph Martinez and Chef Fernando Ruiz for the work they did in making this possible and in committing their lives to helping other people. And I want to thank Tracy and Steve Slepkovic, my very, very dear friends, for sharing the story about what happened to their nephew, who was a son to them, Brandon James, who died 2 weeks ago. 3 days ago, I had a friend who visited me who happens to be from Albuquerque. His name's Doug Fouchier. And he's a very, very close friend. He was a professional bodybuilder. He was about 6'3". He weighed 342 pounds, but solid muscle, no body fat. Absolutely indomitable. One of the most disciplined human beings that I've ever met. He was careful about his diet. He was at the gym 3 or 4 hours a day working for his profession. And yesterday, he was found dead from an overdose in his apartment in Santa Monica. And none of us is immune. All of us have family members and friends who are touched by this disease. And it's a disease that is increasing to bedevil our country because of an epidemic of loneliness and alienation and atomization that is amplified by the social media and dispossession, the disillusionment of a generation of kids who don't feel like they have a future, and who have lost their faith in our country. In 1935, Bill Wilson, who was the founder of the first 12-step program, was in Akron, Ohio, and he had 6 months earlier, he had joined the Oxford Group, which was a group that was devoted to helping people sober up using the principles of first-century Christianity. And before there was any institution of the church, before there were priests, cardinals, bishops, popes, it was a grassroots movement where people met in rooms and basements, and they shared the gospels of Jesus and the gospel of love. And they were trying to recreate that during the mid-20th century in this group called the Oxford Group. They had 6 steps which were intended to induce a spiritual awakening or a spiritual realignment. And Bill Wilson, who had fought alcoholism his entire adult life, joined that group and had a spiritual awakening. And the disease, the compulsion disappeared. This compulsion that he had lived with daily for decades and had been fighting, suddenly it was just obliterated. It was a miracle. And he could not imagine that he would ever take a drink again. For 6 months, he was living without a thought of a drink. And his profession, the cash and prizes started flowing back into his life. He had been a very successful stockbroker before alcoholism robbed him of his fortune. And his career returned. And he had put together a scheme to buy the Firestone Tire Company. And this was the height of the Great Depression. It would have made him millions of dollars, and it would have taken care of him for the rest of his life. And he had put 2 years of work, his entire fortune, into this enterprise, and he got to Akron, Ohio, and the whole deal collapsed. And he was standing in the Mayflower Hotel in Akron, and suddenly the compulsion that he had had returned full force. And he was standing about 30 feet away from the lounge, from the bar, and he could hear the laughter of the patrons, and he could hear the clinking of the ice and the glasses, and it was calling him back into that bar. And he suddenly had the intuition, which was the central secret sauce of the AA program and then all the other 12-step programs after that, which is he suddenly came to understand that the only way that he was going to stay sober that night is if he helped another alcoholic. And he realized that he couldn't live off the laurels of his spiritual awakening. He had to renew it daily by helping somebody else who is suffering. And instead of going into the lounge, he went into the phone booth, and he picked up the yellow pages, and he began calling local preachers, and he called the Salvation Army, just asked them, do you know a hopeless drunk? And a local preacher finally gave him the name of Bob Smith, who was a local doctor who everybody knew was a hopeless drunk. And he got Bob Smith on the phone. Bob Smith agreed to meet with him. They met at the home of the heiress to the Firestone Tire Company. And when he went in there, Bob Smith, who had been approached by hundreds of people in the past trying to get him sober, said, you have 15 minutes. And they ended up talking all night. And that was the first AA meeting. And they then figured out that the only way the two of them were going to stay sober is if they helped a third person. And they started going to the hospitals, and they became regular, and that was the beginning. That's the etiology, that this sense that the only way that we can help ourselves is by helping somebody else, by growing a community, by being part of a larger community in which we find ways to be of service to other people. And, all of these different experiments that are all functioning, there's 1,000 ways to get sober, but they all involve being of service to other human beings, of figuring out how to live in community again. And we're losing that sense of community in our country. We're becoming a country of individuals, of isolation and alienation and dispossession. And, one of the things that I'm going to try to do in the White House is to figure out every way that we can to rebuild those bonds of community by inspiring Americans to try to be of be of use, be of service to other people, and giving them the opportunities in the ecosystem that allows and encourages that kind of conduct. So we're going to have a panel discussion now, and I want to welcome to the stage one of the people I've admired very, very much, who has been very courageous in recent years, one of the few medical doctors who was willing to challenge the orthodoxies, who was looking at what he saw and believed initially, and then started voicing his own doubts and paid a tremendous cost for that. So you all welcome to the stage Dr. Drew Pinsky.
Oh, it's so good to see you. In the various stages in which we gather, you and I, across this great land of ours. But thank you for this. Thank you for bringing attention to this. Thank you for sharing your recovery. As you know, it's a program of attraction, so the more you talk about it, the more you're going to help others. Bobby just made the point that brains heal other brains. That's the way I think about it as a physician. Think about it any way you wish. Think about it as community, as thriving, as meaning-making, as a spiritual connection that exists amongst humans. Jung's name came up. Carl Jung came up tonight already a couple times. I think it was on the video too. So we're going to celebrate that tonight. The other thing, let's bring the panel in. I'll introduce everyone on the panel first, but thank you.
Thank you.
On the panel, you've already met Ralph and Fernando. They are here with us as well. Donna LoCicero, she is one of the filmmakers. Robert Campos, Brandon Gwynn, who you've met through the video, as well as his son Dylan, and Tom Wolf, who is himself you heard his tale on the video as well, right? Tom, of course, is a recovering addict who's been homeless and has been an advocate in California trying to change the insanity of our laws there. Yeah, indeed. So I'll give everyone maybe we'll kind of go across the panel here, give everyone just a minute to sort of introduce themselves and talk about what they think is important to them. I will start. People that don't know, I worked in a psychiatric hospital for 35 years. I ran a large drug treatment center for 20 years. I understand this disease. I understand it in ways that most physicians don't anymore, unfortunately. I was railing against the opioid epidemic as it began, and because the regulatory agencies had been captured, I was punished for daring to say that prescribing of opiates was other than God's work. And literally, that if you didn't treat patient adequately, you would literally go to prison as a doctor. So we'll start on that end and start with Tom. And what would you like to say?
Well, first of all, I really appreciate that Mr. Kennedy wants to talk about recovery on a national platform. That's something the other two candidates are not doing. You know, in the year 2000, there were 17,000 overdose deaths in the United States, which is terrible. And last year, there was 107,000. So it's grown by like a factor of 8. And it's true, we're not doing very much about it. Instead, there's a lot of fighting about drug policy, which way to go, harm reduction, abstinence. The bottom line is that we need to really look at a national model for promoting recovery and helping to get America healthy again. That's what I'll say. Thank you.
Dylan?
I don't even know what to say. I'm just grateful for the opportunity to be up here. You know, I never thought 3 years ago, or even when my journey in recovery began, that I would be sitting on stage in front of a bunch of people, getting to share my experience and, you know, my hopes. You know, this journey through recovery has, it's given me my life back, and I have a family today. I have a beautiful daughter and a beautiful wife that, you know, I never thought I'd get that chance, and yeah, I'm just grateful, so thank you.
Hi, my name is Brandon Gwynn. Sorry about that. You know, same thing, I'll say what Dylan said. I am just grateful to be here because this journey started for me, you know, when he was 17 years old. And the one thing that I wanted most out of all this was to get my son back. And not only do I have him back, but I've been able to step into a world that I knew nothing about. You know, as a dad trying to make a difference, I didn't know anything about anything. And I think that the more that I've been in this line of work, the more I realize I still don't know anything. I think the end of the day, if we can all just say, I don't know, rather than thinking that we have the answers, because the answers lie within the individual. And this is an individual journey. Everybody's recovery is unique to them. And if we just spend more time and effort allowing people to find their way and offering them a space to heal and learn and grow together and give that community and support, then we're going to make a difference and have a, you know, much longer lasting impact than if we, you know, try to do it the way we've been doing it the past 20 years. Like, they get better. Our children get better, and I'm sitting here today a proof of that because, like I said, I didn't know anything about anything, and here I am today, so thank you guys.
Bobby, I'm going to skip you. I'm going to skip you and go across the panel. Ralph?
Thank you. Again, like all the other panelists, I'm just honored to be here and thankful for Mr. Kennedy and wanting to talk about such an impactful crisis. I think that a lot of other candidates, they, you know, focus on more comfortable issues that go on here in the United States, and this is one of the most hard-hitting humanitarian issues that we face, and like some of the other panelists have said, it's an ever-growing crisis, an epidemic, and I know I see it where I'm from. It affects my community, it affects families, and it affects home, and I know it does that same thing to a lot of your guys' communities as well. And so it all begins with discussion, and so I'm just very honored to be able to help be a piece of that discussion. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Donna LoCicero. I'm one of the filmmakers of the film you just saw, Recovering America. And just one of them. The others are in the audience. It's Robert Campos and Brandon Dumlau. Wave your hands, guys. Really talented people. I'm grateful, too, to be up here. I think the issue is bigger than I realized when we first took this on. It's huge. The numbers are stunning. Over 100,000 people who have died in a year, and then 50 million people who are dealing with substance abuse. This is staggering. This is affecting all of us. It's a huge crisis, and I really hope that this film can be a springboard for more discussion, because there's so much to talk about here. One of the biggest challenges we had in making this film was that there's so many aspects to talk about it, and I'm happy to be part of this discussion, and thankful to you.
Can we recover America, please? It's time. It doesn't matter if you're in a big city or Chicago, New York, Phoenix, San Francisco, Albuquerque. It's the small towns and the small pueblos too as well, whether it's a town of 500 or 800 or 1,200 or 2,000. It's affecting everybody the same. I always told myself this, Ralph can back me up on this. I've never wanted to be involved in religion or politics. Once I saw the recovery part of this, I was 100% on board. And thank you for that. Thank you for having this agenda and not another agenda. We need to fix our issues first. So let's start with Recovering America, please. Thank you.
So, Bobby, what's interesting to me is that for the 7 of us up here, we know this disease intimately. This is all sort of matter of fact, what's on the video, what we've been discussing so far. But Donna kind of represents the average American citizen. She's like, what? 100,000 people are killed by this thing? We know that and have known that for years. We know all that goes into this and the suffering and the families that are being affected. What do we do? What are you going to do?
We had in the 20-year Vietnam War, we lost 56,000 American kids. So we're losing almost double that every year from this disease. And you think of the $1 trillion we put into that war and the daily preoccupation on the news, the nightly news coverage for 20 years, the presidential elections that were fixated on it. And it's half the number of people affected that are affected every single year. Our communities are being torn apart. We need to give this the same priority. I'm very reluctant to dictate a government solution. What we found from touring, I wanted to see every place, and I still do this, this is a small fraction of the places that we've actually visited. I wanted to see every place that's doing this right. And what we found is there's a tremendous diversity of approaches that are working very, very well. The one thing almost all of them have in common is that they don't have government support. And so I'm very reluctant to get government involved in a way that is going to micromanage places like this. I want to make government support them, and that may be through land purchases and through those kind of contracts, but I don't want government to be coming in and micromanaging. I think this has to be run by NGOs, and we have to use a lot of different approaches. You know, Franklin Roosevelt, when he was launching the New Deal, said, we're going to try these programs and we're going to try something, one thing at a time, and if it doesn't work, we're going to abandon it and we're going to try something else, but we're always going to be trying something. And, you know, all I can guarantee, I can't tell you right now that there's one solution or even a multiplicity of solutions. What I can tell you is that in my administration, we're going to solve the problem because I'm going to focus on it, and if there's things that are working, we are going to create ecosystems in which those kind of solutions can proliferate. And, Bill Wilson, you know, you were talking about Carl Jung. Carl Jung treated a friend of Bill Wilson's who was a Boston millionaire. He was one of the wealthiest families during the Great Depression, and his name was Roland Hazard. And he was a very capable leading businessman, but he was a hopeless alcoholic. And he was treated by Jung, and then he went out, he drank again almost to beat it. He went out feeling cured. He came back, treated again, and then went out feeling cured, and with days he was drinking again. He finally went back to Jung and he said, for a person with alcoholism, of my seriousness, is there any chance? And he said, give it to me straight. And Jung said to him, okay, I'm going to give it to you straight. There's no chance. And then he said, has it ever been done with somebody of my depth of alcoholism? And Jung said, the only time that it's happened is in people who have profound spiritual realignments. And that conversation was then related by Hazard to Bill Wilson, and then Jung and Bill Wilson began a correspondence, which is talked about in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. But in many ways, that was the central assumption that crafted the spiritual dimensions of the AA program. And the 12 steps of, 12-step programs are intended to induce a spiritual realignment, but everybody understands that has to be maintained and renewed through daily service. And the meetings are actually ways to be of service every day. I came into the program 40 years ago, and I remember asking a guy back then, how long do you have to keep coming to these meetings? And he said, just keep coming till you like it. And I've been going for 40 years every day, and I still don't like it. And I go because the rest of my life works when I go, and I do it the same reason that I brush my teeth. I don't look forward to brushing my teeth. I don't enjoy it. I don't like the sensation. But I don't want to live with the consequences of what happens when I stop.
So as you say, there are various ways that people get to sobriety, but there is one way that's coming in on 100 years of efficacy, particularly when thriving in abstinence is the goal. Full recovery, somebody used that term, I think. And that's the empiric model you've mentioned, the 12-step model, the Mutual Aid Society. There are now our Cochrane analysis. A Harvard professor published a Cochrane analysis that shows that 12-step works as well as any professionally managed interventions. Especially it's superior when abstinence is the goal, except for one thing. It's free, it's available every hour of every day, and why has this been under attack? It's the most shocking thing to me ever. Are you aware that it's been under attack for the last 5 years or so?
It's always under attack. Okay. So I don't know, And listen, it doesn't work for everybody.
No, I'm not saying that it does, but it's free, it's available, and it has potential. My treatment that doctors give doesn't work every time. You'll all attest to that, right?
And so I love that there's so many other approaches to this, and that people are, we visited a place yesterday that just had a multiplicity of other approaches that
you gotta use them all.
Yeah.
You gotta use them all. I'm wondering if you guys have questions for me or Bobby. Tom does.
So I just kind of wanted to expound on what Mr. Kennedy was saying, is that, look, we need all kinds of treatment out there. And, you know, you are right that certain types of treatment are under attack, but the bottom line is that 12-step is evidence-based too. So the big question is the lack of resources. That's the problem. How many treatment beds are in Albuquerque? Does anybody know? It doesn't match the amount of people struggling with drug addiction. That's right. And that's the same can be said in, do you know in San Francisco we have about 24,000 drug users in our city, and we have 500 sanctioned treatment beds for 24,000, and our city spends $700 million. So my question, I guess, would be to Mr. Kennedy and to Dr. Judah, you guys, what is it going to take for states, really for the federal government? Is it going to be a federal oversight kind of addiction treatment model that's going to trickle down to the states, or are we going to have to like kind of just change our whole model completely of how we fund and operate treatment throughout the country to help people get into recovery?
Let me just say this. I thought one of the most exciting discoveries that I made during, you know, this kind of exploration that we've been going on for the last 13 months is what happened in Amsterdam. Because I was in Amsterdam at the height of the open-air drug markets there, and there were 3,000 drug overdoses a year, 3,000. They now, as you saw in the film, have fewer than 40. So they solved the problem. And, you know, we now have, and the great thing is that there are models all over the world for things that actually work. And Amsterdam is doing something that works, and I think that's a place where the government can get involved, because the government can help identify those. We can list the protocols, and then we can give funding to local municipalities who are experimenting with those, implementing those protocols, who are experimenting with other protocols, and continue to perfect the methods that actually work. But we know what works. You know, I talked to the guy, the minister who was running that program there, and I said, why isn't this proliferating all over the world? And he said, it is. In Europe, they're now doing this almost everywhere. And he said, what my full-time job is now to go from capital to capital and help them put these programs together. And I said, why haven't you been to the United States? He said, I've been everywhere there. And I said, have you been to San Francisco? He said, yep. And he said, it was like talking to a wall. And he said, I told him what would work, and nobody wanted to hear it. So, you know, I think one of the roles that government can have is to identify what we know is going to work and then encourage local governments to do those things. And what his methodology is to use this escalation of police and social service intervention to force the addict off the street and into a program where he's going to get help. And then you can use a plethora of approaches to recovery and intervention. But the government has a role in actually pressuring the addict, saying, we're not going to tolerate you on the street anymore, to do tough love. You're not allowed to do this anymore. We're going to clean up your neighborhood. We're going to talk to you 3 times, and if we can't talk you into helping yourself, you are going to prison. You're going to jail until you choose some other option. And that's what they're doing that works so well in Amsterdam.
I would argue that is not tough love. That is rational approach to a life-threatening illness that is progressive, that ends in death. And if you do not intervene, you are duplicitous in negligent manslaughter, 100%. Tom, tell me something. If you didn't have some it's a motivational disturbance. It's a usurpation of the brain's survival systems. So all motivation becomes distorted, and that one priority takes over everything else. So you must create motivation. No?
No, you're correct. So for how many of you in recovery here believe that accountability is a cornerstone of recovery? So that
First, somebody had to ask you to do something.
Right.
Tom, get off the street. Tom, I'm going to put you in jail if you don't. You have to be asked to do something because we have privileged denial. We have privileged it as a human right, and it is a medical symptom. It is synonymous with something called anosognosia, which is something stroke patients get where they don't realize what has happened to them. In addiction, Tom, did you see what was happening to you on the street? Could you perceive what was going on? I know you didn't feel good about it, but could you really see what was... Dylan, could you see what was happening to you when you were sick?
No, not at all. You know,
that's a condition of the brain. And we have taken that condition in the setting of addiction only. In dementia, when they lack insight, if you don't treat those patients, the doctor goes to jail. If I attempt to treat Dylan when he's in denial with anosognosia, I've broken the law. And we've privileged that anosognosia as him volitionally living his life the way he, quote, wants to live it as a human right, and it is effing negligent manslaughter.
I couldn't have put it better.
I have a question. So I think we're all pretty well aware that there isn't enough facilities and there's not enough programs and there's not enough funding and so like I know, I went to 6 different rehabs within my addiction period. I went to rehab in South Florida. I went to rehab in San Diego. I went to rehab twice in Farmington, New Mexico. I went to rehab in Hernandez, New Mexico, and my last rehab.
Kicked out of at least
Yeah, I tried and failed a whole bunch of times, right? And that was part of my journey, the trial and error portion behind it. But in the end, and it's funny because I tell people where I'm from in my community, and I say, yeah, I went to OI recovery. That's where I was able to plant my feet back on the ground. They say, oh, so OI is the one that works, right? And I'm like, well, no, that's the one I chose to work, right? And so there's different strokes for different folks. There's not one, recovery is not a one size fits all. But what I want to ask Mr. Kennedy is what would be your direct plan of attack on addiction?
Well, like I said, I think we need to do, my approach is going to be what they did in Amsterdam, which is to the cities that are really having these problems now of doing very, very aggressive government interventions with assisting, we all know this, that addicts don't come into treatment on a winning streak. They come into treatment because they hit some kind of bottom. And if they don't hit that bottom, you're enabling them to do it. So I think the government has to provide a bottom for them that is, at a higher floor than all the way going into the sub-basement and then finding a trapdoor to go even lower. And the earlier the government intervenes, the better it is for everybody. So I'm going to figure out ways to do government intervention and then funnel those addicts into all the different forms of treatment and that are now available, and try to keep the government out of micromanaging treatment programs and keep those in the hands of NGOs. And the one thing the government can do is to make Medicaid available for treatment. To pay for the beds, and then let the NGOs manage the program.
So Bobby's referring to something called the IMD exclusion. Yes? Is that what you're talking about? And there is a strange history you all should be aware of. The Constitution never provided for the federal government to be involved in healthcare, but particularly mental health care. That's why it fell to the states. That's why there were state hospitals. And it was his uncle that wanted to undo that and make a national policy that there was a lot to that. He was persuaded by some nudniks to do that. He was persuaded by a psychoanalyst who didn't think addiction existed. They thought addiction was part of the Oedipal complex, and that they'd never been in a psychiatric hospital before. And they thought that your uncle could create programs that would prevent addiction and mental illness with these community mental health centers. And the patients were discharged from the state hospitals into the streets, and as you point out, they end up in the prisons, the streets, and the nursing homes, and they don't belong in any of those places. Brandon, were you trying to say something? You go ahead.
Just, a thought here, because you see the demographics of people in treatment. It's predominantly 18 to 25-year-old white males who have good health insurance, whose family make decent money. How do we switch that? The insurance companies are kind of dictating what treatment looks like and who gets it and how it's done. And what are we going to do to kind of change the disparity in that? To have a recovery available for a larger demographic.
To have
recovery available for a larger demographic, because right now it's very
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to get Medicaid to pay for the beds at very least. We met with a group this morning here in Albuquerque who runs an incredible program. I think it's called New Mexico Wellness. Can somebody tell me? What is it?
Endorphins Power?
No.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah. But anyway, they have been able to persuade Medicaid to pay for the beds, and it's only $400. They're giving them, they pay, the cost of this rehab is only $400 a week. And it's a very bare bones rehab, but they're treating many, many, many patients, and they're doing it very well. And we met a lot of them this morning, the people who had gone through that program. And they were actually were able to go to Medicaid and say, here are the costs that these patients are going to cost you with emergency room visits, with ODs in the next, several months if you don't pay for it. And if you do pay for it, it's only $400 a week, and you're going to save a lot of money. And the local Medicaid office was persuaded.
Yeah, part of what we have weird biases in this country. We'll shut down the world for a disease that killed 1 million elderly people, but 1 million young people over 10 years, we're not interested. It's crazy. In terms of years of life lost, addiction has orders of magnitude higher impact on this country than COVID ever did. We are blinded by this idea that people are living their best lives when they're doing drugs. Dylan, I wonder if you could speak to that. You're relatively new in the program, and you've been on both sides of this. How do you get people to understand how this thing affects you?
I guess just by sharing my story, the shame and the guilt is what kept me, I think, sick for a long time. It was embarrassing. I didn't know how to, I thought because I was an addict, I was a bad person, and that I'd never really amount to anything. I've been to treatment 15, 16 times, more times than I can count. And this last place that I went to, I had an experience with horses, a godly experience that I'd never experienced before. And I really struggled with the idea of God. I didn't know how having faith in something would save me. I thought I had to do it myself. And being at this ranch and being with horses just kind of opened my mind, and it just allowed me to open up and to be able to express myself. Is that kind of what you're asking?
No, it's helpful. I just want to hear your point of view. Donna, I'm wondering, because you're relatively new to this whole landscape, yes?
No.
No, okay, no.
No, I'm not. But what was your question?
The question was, I wonder if if you have any thoughts about coming to terms with how this disease affects people. Let's ask this. Do you understand that it is a disease?
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How so? How so?
It isn't like the addiction therapist in the film said, where he thought it was just a matter of willpower. It's not that. It's something deeper, it's something trauma-based, it's something that takes a whole realignment, a spiritual realignment. So I see that. And my life, my parents were both alcoholics. My brother's an alcoholic. I have a daughter in recovery. And I had a good friend die on the streets of San Francisco, and that was very heartbreaking too. I'm thinking though that I see a sea change. I see a shift. I'm seeing in San Francisco, there's a mayoral race going on, and people are rejecting the San Francisco model of treatment right now. There's a guy...
Treatment in quotes. Treatment
well,
in quotes.
Yeah, but Tom Wolfe is nodding his head, yes, because he can speak to this.
He's
right?
in the trenches with it.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things about when you're, like I was homeless and addicted to drugs at the same time in San Francisco, in the Tenderloin. And the biggest thing for me, and I think many people in recovery can look back and say that none of us, I didn't want to die when I was out there, but I didn't care if I did. And that's the disease that creates that kind of hopelessness that you have. So it's really critical for us now as a society to step up and offer the kind of support that we need. And that means funding and resourcing recovery options to get people away from the drugs and get the drugs away from people. That's how you do it. And now, in today's world, with the arrival of fentanyl, it's kind of changed everything because the window of opportunity to do that has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller because so many people are overdosing and dying. So again, it just kind of brings me back to the whole fact that we have a presidential candidate on the national stage talking about a recovery model for America. Everybody should be talking about this because it is the crisis of our generation.
I'd like to speak a little to that disease model because as a father, and I think there's many family members and fathers out there that probably felt very similar to me. I remember going to my son's first family day in the very first treatment. I was like, they're going to try to convince me that addiction is a disease. I'm not going to go to this thing. He doesn't want it. He isn't working hard enough. He's not trying. I was still in that model of shame and fear and guilt, you know, and I didn't know it. That day I sat in there with other families and I listened to their stories and I heard other people sharing the same story, the same emotions and feelings that I had, was the day that I started to open my eyes. Like, it is a disease. And I didn't believe in AA at the time either. It was like, oh, they're just going to try to brainwash my son. It's going to replace this addiction with another addiction. But it was what he needed. I'm not in recovery. I worked the 12 steps. I got an AA sponsor. I worked through the program, and it was life-changing, and it was game-changing for me. So this is work that anybody can do, and we just have to be more open to understanding, like, we don't know. This is a disease, and like we have to treat it like one.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. You want to say something, Fernando?
I was a big believer in being a drug addict was a choice. It was my choice to do drugs when I was younger. It was my choice to traffic drugs and guns when I was younger. But in the last 6-7 years, I've come to realize, after talking to certain folks and certain doctors, that it starts with some kind of trauma, whether it's young. Mine was something totally different to what Ralph's was to do drugs. Because we're not just going to wake up one day and be like, oh, I think I'm going to try some heroin one day today. I think today's the day. It doesn't start like that. Like, we all, I'm not allowed to cuss. We all have demons in our head that we fight with every day. You do, we all do. And if we say we don't, then we're liars. It is a disease. It's not a choice, and it starts as trauma as a young person. At least it did for me. And that's how, in my opinion now, it's not a choice. But at the same time, it is.
So I need to put my doctor hat on for a second and help everyone. If you have to get into conversations or if you're struggling yourself with this idea of it as an illness or a disease, you have to do one thing first. You must have a definition for what a disease is. And then you can sit back and go, does addiction fit the definition of disease? And strangely, I've spoken at universities and professors and fellowships and in medical settings, and they don't have a definition for disease. So I actually had to come up with the definition, which is the following, and you'll see how it covers all diseases. It is a complex relationship between the environment and the genetics of the individual. That relationship results in an abnormal state of physiology. We call that pathophysiology. That pathophysiology is reflected in signs and symptoms. Those signs and symptoms are something that a doctor can see and then infer the abnormal biology. Those signs and symptoms, we know from studying those signs and symptoms that they will follow a predictable pattern. We call that a natural history. Sometimes that natural history is a resolution if it's a cold. Sometimes the individual will die if it's certain cancers. Addiction has a very specific natural history. In the case of opiates, it's progressive and it ends in death. And it has a predictable response to treatment, something we call treatment. Where people get hung up is in the pathophysiology, which is in the case of this disease is in the brain. And we have several candidate genes for what the genes are that are triggered and what you all share genetically. And this biology is in the reward system. It's in the motivation system. It's the part of the brain that is responsible for telling you to survive. And the very survival mechanism gets usurped by this biology in genetically prone individuals, not everybody, and it takes over. Often, the environmental trigger is trauma. And now you have two problems. Now you have a motivational disturbance and the trauma, and they both must be treated. Thoughts?
I mean, I didn't, that's brilliant, and thank you, Drew. I had iron willpower when I was a kid. I gave up candy for Lent when I was 13 years old. I never ate candy again until I was in college. I gave up desserts when I was 14. I never had another dessert till I was in college, and I was trying to bulk up for sports, but then I got addicted to drugs, and I thought my willpower could do anything, and yet this compulsion was utterly impervious to any will. And I said in that film, to me, the most demoralizing feature of this disease was my incapacity to keep contracts with myself. I tell myself at 9 a.m., I'm never going to do that again. Believing it, I'd say it earnestly, sincerely, honestly, and then 4 o'clock I'd be doing it. And I couldn't understand why. People compared it to dancing with a gorilla. At first you really want to do it because it looks like fun. And then, you realize that you only get to stop when the gorilla gets tired, and that's going to be when you're dead. And so it was, for me, understanding that this was not a moral failure was really important, that this was a disease, and I had to treat it like a disease, and it's like diabetes. You can't think your way out of it. You have to act your way out of it. You have to do what you're supposed to do. You have to take the medicine. If you're a doctor and you know more about diabetes than anybody in the world, and you don't take your insulin, you're going to die. So the knowledge does not cure this disease. You actually have to do the actions. And for a lot of us, that means going to meeting, trying to figure out a way to be of service to other people, and then, doing all the simple principles of the program, and that is the treatment. But it is, as Dr. Drew said, two of the features of this disease. One is progression, that it always gets worse. I had the idea that someday I'll grow out of this. Someday, it'll just stop, but it never does that. If you have this disease, either from trauma or genes, you have it forever, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse. The second feature is it wants you dead, but first it's going to make you miserable. And the third feature, a third feature is that it is the only disease that is telling you that you're not sick. It's a disease that puts you in a state of denial, so that somebody outside of you has to tell you, and this is why it's important for government to do that, to say, you got a problem, and we're not going to let you, have the reverberations of that problem to spread from you to the rest of society. We're going to put some guardrails on your behavior and make sure that you can get help for your disease.
And embedded in what you're saying, you cannot do it alone, both from the standpoint of the community and in terms of the service. But you guys, I'll start with Ralph. We've been talking about the genetic, did you want to say something, Fernando, first, or you had the mic? Okay, because you're also the person I want to get a comment on this from, because it's kind of interesting. We talk about the genetic quality of this disease. This disease has been in the human genome throughout human history. It was alcoholism through much of that. We invented all these more powerful chemicals that took over for the alcohol. And yet it has persisted in the human genome. It must have evolutionary adaptive advantages. I've been thinking about that for a long time, and it does. The people who get this disease, it's an incredibly rich population, intelligent population, creative population, and I'll be damned if they aren't the best survivors of all time. They survive in adversity. Thoughts? Ralph?
Yeah, there's a lot wrapped up when you get to the point of, I know for me, waking up one morning and accepting the fact that I was an addict was a tough thing. I grew up, being raised by a single mom, and she, was 18, raising 2 kids in a low-income neighborhood, and she worked hard to get us out of that environment because she wanted her 2 boys to have a chance, right? And so we witnessed that. We were taught values, and we were taught hard work, and we were shown a lot of different things, and I never thought I always saw commercials and heard of people saying, oh, look at this person and that person, don't do drugs because you can end up like this and you can end up like that. And then, the peer pressure getting into high school, because in high school is when I started to experiment. I started experimenting when I was in high school, and I kept saying, no, 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 no. And then that one time, all it took was that one time for me to say, I guess I'll try it. Right? And the minute that I tried it, I can still remember it like it was yesterday, and it was cocaine that I tried. And when I tried it, I said, whoa, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. As a matter of fact, it's quite the opposite. It's really good, right? And then I thought, well, I'm not like everybody else. I'm me. I'm stronger than that guy, and I'm stronger than that guy, and nobody thinks it's going to get them, right? And it starts at some point. But when it does hit, and you get to that point where you're in full-blown addiction, you don't even know how you got there, because nobody wants to become an addict. Nobody wants to become homeless, living on the streets. Nobody wants to be out there trying to hustle for something that they think is going to make them feel better, only to make them feel worse, to hustle even more to get that same thing to feel better that just made them feel worse. It's a psychological thing, right?
Biological thing.
But a little bit
because psychologically you knew it would make you feel worse, and yet it happened.
And yet here we go again. You just fell into the routine, But it takes a lot. And I look back at all my trials and errors, and again, we talked about how it's different strokes for different folks. There's no one size fits all when it comes to recovery, but it's just individuals feeling like they have the support when they're ready, because everyone is ready at different times, right?
Fernando?
I have to admit, I was selling drugs before I started experimenting with drugs. I started experimenting with drugs. I knew I was in experiment with drugs before I started selling drugs. After seeing individuals on drugs that I was selling to them, made me curious to the fact is I wanted to see what it feels like, what my next door neighbor's feeling, because I used to sell drugs to my next door neighbor. What she was feeling like, what he was feeling, whether it was heroin, meth, coke, weed, alcohol. But while experimenting with meth, getting addicted to meth, all I could think about was my trauma growing up. Ralph knows my trauma growing up. I've probably told 5 people in my life what my trauma is growing up, and the only reason I wouldn't express it here is because that person is still alive, and I don't need to cause any family issues. And that's all I thought about for the first year and a half that I was now an addict selling drugs to certain people. And we need to fucking fix this, man. I'm sorry. Like, we need to try to fix this. Like, it's not the little kids. It's not the 13-year-olds, the 15-year-olds now. Now it's the 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds that are getting their hands on these little blue pills. So, yeah, sorry for cussing.
So, Bobby, we're sort of coasting towards our wrap-up here. We're here to support you. We're here to hear your thoughts. I want to give you a few moments to kind of give us your final take on this topic that this panel has been kind enough to come and discuss with you.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about the question that you asked about, you know, what is the selective advantage to having that addiction gene, you know, in your society or as an individual. And I don't know the answer to that, but one of the things...
You know the answer to that?
Well,
I do too.
I mean, here's what I would hypothesize, and I don't think this is a particularly complete answer. I think addicts have a restlessness, they have an empty space inside them that is yearning constantly for something, that is willing to take risks that other people won't take.
100%.
That has a sort of a drive I would say, kind of a constant dissatisfaction with what they have now. And that actually, that very, very negative drive, it can be destructive, but it also can open new horizons and new opportunities that other people would never experience, because it's making you do things that are a little bit crazy, that people who have a normal risk profile would not engage in. So you could be the one who discovers a new continent. You could be the one that wins the lottery that nobody else would bet on because the chance of winning is so little. You could be the Ted Turner. If you look at Ted Turner's life, it's just one insane risk after the other, and they all paid off, you know.
Great fighter pilots, great extreme athletes, great shortstops, great survivors in extreme circumstances.
Yeah. So, you know, I think there's an advantage to it if those qualities can be virtues, if they're harnessed for a whole society. And you see so many people who are involved in addiction who are now involved in curing or treating the problem with all these, you know, this entrepreneurial, extraordinarily innovative ideas that are just beautiful and that bring us together as society, that do things that are crazy, like go start a horse farm for addicts in the middle of the American, you know, hinterland, or, you know, giving their lives walking the streets among homeless people and dangerous people in San Francisco and saving people's lives. So, you know, how do we harness those energies? How do we harness that aptitude, that appetite for risk? And it all comes with restoring a sense of community in our country. And, you know, my job as President of the United States will be to do that, to remind Americans we're all part of a community. The only way that we're going to survive as a people is not by leaving our poor brothers and sisters behind or the people who don't fit behind, but go back and figure out how we include everybody and how we amplify and multiply the opportunities for service with each other and the opportunities to reconnect in community.
We are rolling to a stop here. I want to thank this panel for agreeing to be here and come up and share their ideas. Donna for the great film, the great work they do. But we are here to support Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to get these ideas into Washington. Thank you to Robert Kennedy for putting this together. Thank you for Donna for Recovering America. Thank you for you being a part of it. And let's all be a part of the solution.
And we're going to do a selfie line for anybody who wants to take a picture. We're going to go do a selfie line now. So thank you.
Secret Service, please, so he doesn't have to spend his own money. Get this man some Secret Service, please.